And welcome to another Biddle on, what is the date today? I don't know.
15th.
15th.
Yeah.
No, 16th.
March 16th of 2019. The stream that almost didn't happen.
Oh, yeah, it is.
Because reasons, Thomas, reasons. All right.
Sure. Not my reasons, though.
How's everybody doing?
Great. Doing good.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay. We'll listen to stream.
All right. Can we get a sound check on the stream to make sure it's sounding okay?
It sounds okay.
All right.
Yeah, I checked it on mine too.
Well, at least today we'll find out the answer to the age-old question: is Fedora the choice of the GNU generation? Craig wants to know. Well, I'm not going to spoil it, but the Telegram group didn't sound too thrilled with Fedora. Just saying, throwing it out there. I would be doing the stream on Fedora because it's been working perfect for me for the last week, and I finally got the whole Rocket League thing fixed. And because I didn't do anything, it just fixed itself. I don't know if it was a driver update or what. And everything's been working great. And then I go to do the stream, and Zoom just giving me such a hard time and such grief with it. So we're not on Fedora 29 right now. We're back on Arch Plasma doing the stream. But at least we're here. So that's a plus, right?
So you're not having problems with Zoom anymore on Arch then?
Well, I don't know if we'll have the freezing issue.
Yeah.
Like we did last week. We could very well have that, but we're not having... I mean, it's at least working, unlike in Fedora 29.
The stream is live, so that's that.
All right, so let's do it. Let's talk about Fedora 29 because it is the distro challenge for the week. Chris, you want to start us out?
Okay, did I unmute myself?
You did.
Yes, I did. Okay. Well, I live in Fedora, and specifically Fedora 29, which I had much debate if I was going to go from 28 to 29. I didn't see a whole lot of advantage of it. What 29 is prepping for 30. And 30, they're going to hold that from what I understand, and wait for things to stabilize before deciding what they do next. As far as working in 29 for the challenge, I used something I hadn't used before, and that was Mate or Mate or however you want to pronounce it. And to my surprise, it's pretty much just GNOME 2. But it, after a little bit of a hiccup on one of the installs, it's been working great. I've been throwing a bunch of weird stuff on it on my broken hardware, and it's hasn't failed me, hasn't really given me a whole lot of problems. I don't know if it's because I know what I'm getting into with Fedora. I know how to get around the things and how to use DNF and how to look at the system control journal and all that other stuff, or if it's just pure luck. I have no, but anyhow. So unlike what seems to be happening with a lot of people, I have not had a bad experience, nor have I had an experience that would turn me off from it.
Well, that's good. How long you said you've been using Fedora?
Since about 2003.
Yeah, so you're pretty familiar with everything that possibly could go wrong, and you've been through it all so far.
Yeah.
So... yeah.
I'd rather be lucky than good any day.
Exactly. All right. Paul, what kind of experience did you have with Fedora, or did you try it?
Yeah, I did try it. Excuse me, I was finishing dinner. I tried it in a VM only, though. I didn't really put it on bare metal. And when I went to the console and I typed just apt to get, and it said that's not in Fedora. So I don't know.
No, it's definitely not in Fedora because they use a different system than apt.
Right, and I'm so used to Ubuntu apt, so I didn't know how to do anything.
Okay. Fair enough, brother. Fair enough. Vash, you had a great time with Fedora, didn't you?
I mean, it wasn't terrible, but I mean, the installer is unique. Very unique. I did not care for it moving the, I think it's install button. You have the install button on the bottom right, and then all of a sudden the button to go back to the previous screen is on the top left. It's just strange. I just found it a very odd installer. But once I got past that, there were, I think, 1.2 gigs of updates. They were a little on the slow side, but I mean, they ran. I had restarted. Everything was fine. I messed around with it a little bit. I got Zoom installed. I ended up bailing on it at the last minute just because I didn't have a chance to mess with it. I didn't have any other Zoom meeting to try before this, and I didn't want to, have the same situation that Rocco had. So I was just like, oh, I'll just boot back into Kubuntu tonight. But I did not have much luck with the Cinnamon install on my desktop, but I think that's more of a Cinnamon thing. Or I'm sorry, not desktop, laptop, ThinkPad. I think that's just a Cinnamon thing with this ThinkPad. I could have probably messed with it and figured something out, but I just installed the KDE version. It was okay, but there were definitely some oddities there, like I say, with the installer. And I don't know if maybe DNF's a bit slower, but maybe that's it, or maybe it was just, the hardware. I don't know.
Well, I installed Fedora 29 GNOME version way earlier in the week. Actually, it was last week I did it. And I installed Cinnamon on top of that, and I didn't have any problems with Cinnamon, with the exception of the normal issues that you normally have in everywhere, which is like NVIDIA screen tearing and stuff like that. And I worked those out. So I was actually enjoying using the Cinnamon version this week. What specific problems did you have with Cinnamon?
Just like when I would have a window up, rather, it would have like a black thing around it. And I think that's, again, just probably something weird with the built-in graphics card on this ThinkPad.
Yeah.
And I did do some Googling or DuckDuckGo or whatever just to see if I could figure out what was going on. And I found some tweaks for it, but it ultimately sounded like a lot of times that maybe it's just a weird issue with Cinnamon. And like, I know people were talking about it in the Mint forums, and I think one of the recommendations was ultimately to go to XFCE or Mate, but I just went KDE because I knew KDE works on this machine fine with the Kubuntu install I have.
Were you getting that notification when you logged in that it was in software rendering mode? Because Cinnamon will do that if it, yeah.
I don't think so, but I didn't look too close for it.
It's huge. I mean, it's a giant box in the top right corner. So I mean, you'd know.
Gotcha.
And that's one of the things is that the shadows and the transparencies and everything are really weird when it's trying to do it software.
Yep. All right, Frank, you're up, sir.
Good day, everyone. So I ran the regular good old GNOME version for about 2 hours, and I couldn't deal with it anymore. I can run, if someone crazily has me do a GUI server that's CentOS or Red Hat, and I have to deal with GNOME for a little bit, I can deal with it, but it drove me crazy, so I put XFCE on there. And that was interesting. When I first booted it up, so it's like a 4-point-something gig DVD download, and my first boot up, it was a 1.6 gig of updates, and that's pretty crazy, especially for XFCE. And it didn't have anything installed. It doesn't have LibreOffice by default, and it was just really weird. And it's pretty ugly, especially for a spin. So I'm going to say it's supposed to be like Ubuntu. I did a crazy thing. I looked at Jason's script. I read it, crazily enough, and I installed it. And that actually made Fedora much, much better. It put a lot of good stuff on there. I spent a couple of hours fixing up XFCE to make it look good. I posted a little picture with a Deadpool background, and I mean, it's livable, but it doesn't excite me.
Is it something you're going to stick with?
Until Wimpy comes out with the update to 1904 Mate and maybe the Maybe that Pi Mate that he's secretly working on. No, I'm not going to wait for. I'm just going to get rid of it and just wait for those.
Nice. So you said that it wasn't nice looking. Now, have you ever installed Intergo's XFCE? Because that really isn't nice looking.
No, I haven't actually done that. So I was comparing it a little bit to RPM versions. Like when we did OpenSUSE. OpenSUSE doesn't really have a spin on XFCE. They just have, you can install it. And so it just puts a really basic XFCE version on, which I don't mind. You're just installing XFCE, but this is a spin. And it didn't have the whisker menu enabled by default. And I can't remember using like anybody's version that doesn't have it as its default, unless you're doing like a basic XFCE install. So it's just weird.
Well, I'm not sure how official the XFCE spin is. Like, I'm not sure how much they put into it, unless they just do maybe like you said, like a bland XFCE version. Thomas, what did you think about Fedora 29, sir?
Okay, so just as a little background information, I have had Fedora 29 running in VMware since about January-ish. And the reason for that is because I'm currently taking a class on Linux at my local college. And it was required that I had to run Fedora in VMware, like specifically like that. So I installed the GNOME version when I got it installed. And one thing that I've noticed consistently with Fedora is that DNF or Yum, whichever it is that it uses, consistently feels slower than apt. And if I'm not mistaken, part of the reason for that is because it's written in Python, whereas apt is written in C++, which would make a lot of sense as to that speed difference. In my mind, you do not make a package manager in Python. It's a very bad idea. But if it works, it works. I haven't really had any significant issues with it. Nothing like earth-shatteringly, oh, this isn't going to work. The only thing that really bugs me with it is the default GNOME configuration. You don't have dock-to-dash, and I know that's a personal preference. It just, to me, it feels a lot easier to use when you have that. But if you do prefer a more stock GNOME experience, I don't know who you are if you do prefer a more stock GNOME experience. But, okay, Colin, you can be the weird outlier there. But if you do prefer a more stock GNOME experience, it does feel and look a lot closer to stock GNOME. The only thing that I really absolutely hate, other than the fact that it doesn't use apt, that is like immediately turning me off, which I know I can fix and I have fixed it, is when you first boot into it, the keyboard shortcuts, none of them are your normal defaults. Like Control-Alt-T does not open a terminal. It does nothing. And Control up and down, yeah, that changes your workspaces, but that's about it. That's default. Everything else is weird, and you actually have to go look at it. So
Super key works.
Yeah, super key works, but it's still not the default. When I boot into a Linux distro, I'm expecting your default keyboard shortcut to open up a terminal to be Control-Alt-T. And if that doesn't work, I'm trying Control Super T, Super Alt T, and if none of that works, then what are you doing?
Well, we're coming from an Ubuntu perspective world here.
This is true.
So, to be fair, Kubuntu do not believe has Control-Alt-T because I cannot use it on this machine.
Okay. Well, and I do understand that that is something you can very easily fix, and that is perfectly fine. It's just, that's one of those things that if you don't have that as default, somebody who doesn't understand that, like a very newbie person to Linux. They come into this not expecting. They come into this expecting, your default keyboard shortcuts. They're going to be baffled. Which Fedora is not made for those.
Thomas, people use a mouse. Most people they don't do shortcuts.
Yeah.
That's
most normal people
learn to use your shortcuts because they're much faster.
But most normal people don't use the shortcuts. Okay, I mean, I shouldn't say it like that. Most normal new users do not use keyboard shortcuts.
I understand this.
Control
defaults. You should still have the defaults, because not all normal users are the same.
Yes, I think but Thomas, Thomas, that's a little bit of an opinion, though, don't you think?
Yes, and I do understand that those are easy to change. Okay, and I know
I honestly think that default that you're talking about is actually split right down the middle. It's between Windows Enter and Control Alt T. I think it's you'll if you tried one or the other, it's probably going to work. Maybe there's something else too, but I mean, I think from all the things that I've tried or seen, it's almost right down the middle.
Well, let me go back to. Go ahead, Nate.
I never Control Alt T to open my terminal because it's always turned on by default whenever I boot up. It's always there. I don't ever turn it on.
Well, I don't control. I have a different keyboard shortcut, but
why are you complaining about it?
Wait, you just spent 5 minutes complaining about not having Control Alt T, and you don't even use it. Really?
I do not use Control Alt T on my personal machine. However, when I boot into a VM of a different distro, I use it all the time because I'm not going to take the time to change those keyboard shortcuts. Because most of the time when I'm testing our distros, I have them installed for like a week, maybe a day or two at the minimum, and then it's gone. So I'm not going to take the time to change those keyboard shortcuts. This thing, yes, I took the time to change it because I have to have it installed all semester. So
you could always control F2.
Whatever. My point is, it's really weird. DNF is slow in my usage, but it works. Okay, fine. Otherwise, it's not really my thing. If you prefer a stock GNOME experience, there's something that's kind of close. But
well, Thomas, going back to the DNF thing. Now, I don't know why your usage was for being slow. I did not have that same experience. I had a really good experience with DNF, not just in the fact that it wasn't slow, but there were little things in DNF that are pretty awesome. Like, for example, if you go to search for a program, say, I don't know, Zoom, and it just happens to be in the repository. Zoom is not, but just say you're searching for a program and it happens to be in the repository. It will automatically say offer to install it, and then after it's installed, it automatically runs it.
Yeah,
because you tried to run it.
And that is something that I did like. I will say that. I did like that if I try to run a command and the command is not installed, it will try to install it if it can, and then run the command I tried to run.
Right.
And I appreciate that. That is great. But at the same time, I feel like I do like it. Don't get me wrong. There's a part of me that also feels like there might be a security issue in there, but I'm not a security person, so I'm not going to make that claim. It just feels that way.
Well, I could see there being a security issue if it was somewhere outside, but if it's something that's already in the repo, then I don't see it being as a security issue. Like if it's something wild on the web, I could see that. But
but it's not like you're on Windows and you try to run a command on Windows and it just pulls something. But it works. Don't get me wrong. If you like RPM distros or distros that use DNF or whatever, or you like GNOME, you'll have a great time. Don't get me wrong. My personal usage, it felt slow. But that could be because it was in VMware. Everything else I've ran in VMware, it was perfectly fine. So it could just be Fedora in VMware. But I don't know. It could be something else.
The one thing that I want to say, not in so much a defense, but just because you may not know, DNF also actively goes out and searches for dependencies. So if you do not have a dependency installed and a package has it listed as a requirement, it will go out there and get it. And that may slow it down a little bit, or at least in a perception of being a little bit slow. And that's one of the reasons why I like DNF over apt, but I mean, that's my personal preference. So.
Yeah. And one thing I did notice when I was using DNF, and I'm not used to DNF, just putting that out there as a disclaimer. With apt, whenever you go to update your system, you have to do apt update and then apt upgrade. With DNF, you can literally just do DNF upgrade or whatever the equivalent is, and it kind of checks if you haven't checked recently.
Yes. Is that a bad thing?
For you. No, I really like that because that is something that constantly bugs me about apt, that I constantly have to run that one command. It takes only a few seconds, but save me a few seconds, please, so I don't have to run the stupid command. I'm writing a whole program that does this for me. I am writing a package manager front end that does this for me. Obviously, it bugs me.
Well, but DNF GUI front end is not something I really like. I always do it from the command line to begin with. But I mean, searching for a package in the DNF GUI, you might as well just
and I don't use GUIs either.
Out.
All the front ends I deal with are typically command line front ends these days, unless we're talking about Synaptic. Synaptic's amazing, but Synaptic's an outlier.
All right. So Fedora's not for you, is basically what you're saying.
No, it's not for me. Might be for somebody else, but not for me.
All right. Dan, what do you think about Fedora?
It's not my favorite either, but it's okay, I guess. I could if it was the only Linux distribution out there, I'd run it.
Wow, he said the only one out there.
No, I didn't mean it that way. Actually, but if it was one of the few, it's towards the top. I mean, it's pretty polished for the most part, honestly. They do a pretty good job. It's just, it's got some quirks and it's not the same. So it's not muscle memory for me, a lot of the things. So I feel more comfortable in something Ubuntu. So that's kind of where I reside most of the time.
Right.
I don't know. I don't have a real
Did you
preference.
have the same experience with DNF as Thomas had, where it was slow and everything, or?
No, I've never had a issue with DNF being slow. Personally, I dislike the GUI, like everybody.
I think everybody
mentions.
dislikes the GUI.
Yeah, I mean it's absolutely horrible, but it's there. But from a command line, I don't have a problem with it, and we just tested it not too terribly long ago, and I did run it again this week, and I had submitted a bug last time with Firewall D where it didn't prompt you for elevated privileges, and they fixed that. So that was really super cool. I got to test that, and that was good stuff. That's one of the reasons why we do these things, is so that we can help make it better for everybody. So I was happy about that. Yeah, like I could get by honestly in Fedora. It's just it's not my go-to.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, like I had a really good experience the whole week. I enjoyed using DNF. It was stable as anything that I've used. Nothing crashed, except for when I went to start the stream and Zoom wouldn't work right. But other than that, everything was awesome. I did have a problem with the updates, not specifically in the terminal, but you would get a pop-up saying that there were updates. So you would click it and it would start the GUI. So I figured, well, you know what? I'll try it with the GUI because it's there. Because that's what we're here for. We're here to try it. And it did one of those kind of Windows things where it says restart, and then you boot into this whatever interface that you can't do anything with, and it's just applying updates. and then it reboots after it's done. That I didn't like. I think the last week I've watched probably 4 videos, and one of the pros to Linux is people saying, and you don't have to restart when you update. And then I'm thinking to myself, I'm on Fedora and it's asking me to restart to update just like Windows would. So I don't really care for that part of it. And I don't even know if you would have to restart if you did it through the terminal. Chris, do you know?
No, to get the latest kernel you would, but anything else, unless there's something that had a hook in with the kernel that needed the updated kernel. About that, but that's about the only time you would have to do a restart would be if you had a kernel update that you had to have.
I don't think anything else.
And I think also that might be a GNOME thing, because I tried 3 different spins, none of them GNOME or GNOME, and I'm pretty sure that last time I did try it, it did ask me to reboot, and I thought that was really strange. So.
It did it to me on Cinnamon. I don't know if that's a official flavor.
But you know what? I wasn't using the UI because it just wouldn't work for me. So
right.
That could be why.
So now, how do the normal Ubuntu systems do it when they update? Do they? I mean, they don't ask you to restart. Do they wait to use the new kernel once it's installed to put it into effect, or what?
Some of them will prompt you when it's done with the update. It'll tell you that in order for the kernel to take effect, that you need to restart. But for the most part, I don't think they do. Yeah, they don't. For anything else, that it usually restarts the service when it installs it, so you don't have to.
Well, and you've got live patch as well, so
yeah, that's for the kernel. Yep.
Yeah, and I don't know if because everything else, since it's just file based, essentially you're putting a new version of a file in place.
Yeah.
But it's not overwriting your current session, so you can continue to run. Like if you accidentally updated something and realized, oh God, I didn't want to do that, like you can actually back it out and still be safe.
So basically the updates don't go into effect until you restart. They just don't prompt you to restart.
At least until you shut down the program.
Restart or at least restart your session. So if you were to update something that was like a desktop app,
right.
Once you restart your session, you don't have to restart the whole system, but just your session in some cases.
Right. So if you just log out, you don't even have to restart. Just log out and then log back in. It'll do it then too.
Right.
But like if you updated like Firefox, say, and you had it running,
yeah,
it won't use the new version until you shut Firefox, close it and then restart it, and then it'll use the new version. So
yeah, and that you wouldn't even have to log out. You can just literally close the app and just start it back up, and it would be the new version.
But you can always tell what's going on with your kernel also by using uname. So it'll give you what kernel you're currently running.
Right.
So I know the popular popular opinion is that we should, we can update without having to restart. And honestly, personally, and I don't see the need for like long uptime on a desktop system. I mean, I understand not being interrupted by a la Windows. But like I understand, like it's like do you really have mission critical like virtual machines running on your desktop? Like you probably shouldn't.
Everything I do is mission critical, dude.
There you go.
Save it and restart.
So at the same time,
reboot. If it wasn't Big Daddy Linux, it would be mission critical Linux.
That's what it would be exactly. See, Eric knows.
So on my main have SSDs, and so like rebooting is like 10 seconds at most, and aside from post time, but so there's the issue of like, okay, big deal, you have to restart, but also there's if you update the machine and you're kind of like restarting things piecemeal, like you could run into some issues and some stability problems. And so why doing offline updates, as they would refer to them as, doing offline updates after you reboot and then rebooting again back into the new environment is a much safer way to restart everything than having to restart the service or restart the application or restart your session. Like if you restart the machine, you're in a much better situation than.
You mentioned something I was going to talk about. Services sometimes will as they're updating shut themselves down, update, and then restart. So,
but at the same time, I don't want to have to restart if I've just updated my Office suite or something. Like
exactly.
It is kind of nice in that sense.
They do separate that at least in the GNOME Software Center. They do separate application updates from OS updates.
Yeah.
So like LibreOffice, it'll list as like a separate update, whereas where they have like specific OS updates, whether it be like important libraries, services, kernel, system D, things like that. Those are what they restart for, not necessarily GNOME maps.
Well, I bring up the YouTube videos about one of the pros of Linux just as a side note because I thought it funny that it was asking me to restart. I don't personally have a problem with it restarting. What I was having an issue with was I was restarting into this environment where you can't do anything. So if I want to do my updates and I want to continue working and then I have to restart in order to apply the updates, I'm okay with that. But if I have to boot into an environment where I got to sit there for 3, 4, 5 minutes waiting for just the updates to go through and then I have to reboot again to get back into the system I can actually use, that's kind of where I have the problem.
So while inconvenient is the safer way to do things.
Well, and then if you had to run those updates and then have it reboot and run the updates again, and then it would reboot again, and then there's no system like that out there, though. Fortunately,
no.
That sounds like Mac OS.
No.
To be fair,
having flashbacks.
To be fair, I have had problems with GNOME on Wayland with updates and stuff like that, where I've had to back down to the kernel version, and thank God, my systems keep 7 versions of the kernel. And I can usually find one where I can at least get booted and rip out what went wrong.
You don't have that problem with XFCE.
No, and
that's because XFCE never updates.
Yeah, I haven't been running GNOME for probably close to about 6 months, basically as my users are complaining that it's too difficult. So I put Cinnamon on there, and everybody seems to be happy.
Yeah, Cinnamon's running pretty good, man. All right, we're like 33 minutes in, and we only got like 6 people done.
Yeah.
Oh my, Big Pod, you're up.
Okay, I'm gonna go more technical. I like the installation; it's quite good, and especially the net install. It has like multiple options. You can do either server or desktop from say ISO, and you can choose what desktop you want. It's actually quite good. And I believe it was Frank who said about having 2 gig updates from after downloading 4 gig ISO. That's because the ISO has a squash image. So basically, when it was done, it was compressed, and that's it. It doesn't have any updates. Updates come after you install, because then it unsquashes the file. Basically, it installs as is on the drive. Otherwise, I had no problem running Fedora, except one problem I had today. I was trying to watch DistroTube's live stream and I couldn't in Firefox. It doesn't have correct Fedora doesn't have correct codecs for HTML5 live streams on YouTube.
Did you do the RPM Fusion?
No, I didn't. I was going as is, so basically completely clean.
Yeah, that would probably have fixed it for you, but yeah, I get you.
Okay. Yeah, it would have fixed it.
I guess that as well, but I didn't want to do it for a reason to see like how Fedora did it with its own repos without any outside repos.
Well, I got to back up because one of the comments that Kevin made in chat reminded me about an issue I did have. I tried to install snaps, and they did install, and I was able to get some of them working, but some of them not. But it was the system itself was now having issues because of the snaps. And I went to the Fedora Telegram group, and they said I was getting a lot of SE Linux alerts. Snaps was trying to do this, or UMount was trying to do this, or whatever. And basically they said, uninstall snaps and use Flatpaks because they're the supported way to install apps on Fedora. Whether you agree with that or not, whether you like snaps or Flatpaks, I guess that's the recommended way to do it. So I did that, and then I stopped having any issues at all. So, all right.
SSX is its own worst enemy. So.
Yeah. Well, there was probably 40 alerts from snaps and being installed. So, Barbara.
So I guess Fedora isn't for me, but yeah. No, but it's Barbara's turn.
Yep. Okay.
Sorry, Big Pod.
Yep. I use the live USB, and even that. Okay, I didn't really have problems with it until when I realized, oh, the default desktop is GNOME. So of course that was just kind of weird. But there were a couple things that I did notice with it. Is that every single application by default opens with full screen. Drives me nuts. I realize you can go in and change it, but I mean, with Ubuntu and stuff, they don't do that. At least not with Mate. So that was something that kind of drove me nuts. And the video codecs, they're not on the live USB. I guess you have to install them after you install Fedora. And so I couldn't test to see how it would handle videos coming off my file server. Did see my file server, so that was a plus. And it could not see my NVIDIA graphics card. It only saw the integrated, Intel integrated graphics. That's all it saw. It would not see the NVIDIA card because the laptop I tried it on has both. So I thought that was just,
RPM Fusion would fix that as well.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. And the other thing is I couldn't change, even with and maybe it's because I couldn't get to the graphics card. I couldn't change the refresh rate to 120 hertz as opposed to 59 point something. It was 59.95 or something crazy. And so that to me was that bothered me. So, and one last thing, the high DPI, it handled it very well, but it only does full integer scaling. So like 100%, 200%, 300%. And that was just the other kind of weird thing. Overall, I didn't think it was that bad, but being an Ubuntu person, I don't think I would install it and use it. And I don't think it was just because that was the GNOME desktop. So that's my take on it.
Fair enough. All right, Adam, you are up.
So I actually tried out Fedora 30 while it's in development. So that was a little bit of a different experience. But I love Fedora. Fedora is actually my favorite distro. So I don't know. I think I like it. I don't have any negatives. Like everything's great.
Was that an alpha, or are they already in beta on that?
No, they're not in beta. It's
okay.
Still technically part of Rawhide. I don't know. Like I enjoy, Flatpaks. Flatpaks are great. I enjoy the GNOME interface quite a lot. The support was great. The packages are there that I use and need. RPM Fusion fills the gap that otherwise is there. Installing third-party things like Chrome and NVIDIA drivers and Steam was dead simple through the GNOME Software Center. I don't know. I don't have any problems. It's great.
Hey, man. That's what we're here to talk about. I didn't have any problems either. Like I mentioned a few, but they weren't problems to me. Let's put it that way. I actually enjoyed it. Eric, you're up.
I'm very happy to hear that others have done well with it, because I'm thinking maybe if I had a desktop, it would have been an easier issue. So like Barb said, with the graphics, that was just a huge problem for me. It was a non-starter. Nouveau. So, okay, one step back. The live images that I got from spins.fedora.org, at least the Cinnamon one for me, had a lot of issues. I was getting all these kernel prompts about the Nouveau driver failing and the kernel not crashing, and really crazy stuff. And I checked the image, and the image was fine. I downloaded it again just to be safe. So anyway, tons and tons of problems. I tried over and over and over. I tried with the Plasma version. I tried with And Fedora for me over the years has been something that I've tried so hard to like, and it has never ever worked for me just cleanly, And so I tried running it on a virtual machine just to see, okay, I'm going to at least get past this video driver thing and try to see if I can do stuff like install Docker, install some, Node.js, some stuff that I'd be using on a normal workstation. Even that I had problems with it and I don't know if it was SE Linux or like what was the problem was, but I just couldn't get the commands to run properly. The environment wouldn't work properly. And I think what's basically happened to me is I've gotten to the point where Ubuntu and Arch-based distros make my life so easy when it comes to managing my PC that when I'm challenged and have to go outside of that and start to spend a lot of my time just adminning my system, I get really frustrated. And that might be unfair of me. And it could be that maybe I just need to have a little more patience and there's a payoff at the end. I just don't see it. I mean, I didn't see it with OpenSUSE and I don't see it with Fedora. I love just about every version of Ubuntu that I run, every version of Arch. And, that's a little bit of there's a couple out there.
You've been distro hopping for a while. Like
a long time.
Yeah. See, that to me is comes from distro hopping and trying out all these systems where you get to the point where like you said, you just want a system to just get up and work. And when you have to work for it, it's not worth it because there's so many other good choices out there.
That's absolutely true. Yeah.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Frank.
Can I ask if anybody else in this chat did run Jason's scripts that he posted up?
I did not.
I did not. Because I read them, and all it was going to do was put some themes on, and I mean, it wasn't going to fix any of the problems that I was having.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah, and RPM Fusion, I tried the drivers out of there. I tried getting the binary blobs from NVIDIA. I mean, I tried everything I could, and literally spent probably between 6 and 7 hours this week, like just trying really hard to get it to work, and it just wasn't happening. Again, could be this laptop, could be the hybrid graphics, could be that's the biggest issue. There's other things that it did that I thought was weird. A lot of people mentioned the installer and some other stuff. I'm not going to spend time on that, but just not for me. So, but and one thing I did want to mention. So I ran from my safety blanket and I got Manjaro Cinnamon, and just for the fun of it, put it on a flash drive. 20 minutes later, I had everything installed. You boot from the disk, and you say non-free drivers, so it installs the drivers for you.
Yep.
I didn't have to do anything. I mean, it's just there. It's beautiful. I changed the theme and a couple little things like that, but 20 minutes, boom, done. And I could start installing my stuff and just getting on with my life. And I think that's the level of expectation that people have these days. And when I struggle that hard, I think I can't be the only one. And do other people really put up with this if they've tried Ubuntu and if they've tried Arch? So
yeah, you're not alone.
That's
I'm right there with you.
I hate it as well.
I don't hate. I see benefit, and I'm sure there are people like
it's benefit, but for me, I can't deal with that.
Yeah.
All right, Nate. Let's hear some positive vibes about Fedora. Come on. You got some, right?
Okay, so I've used Fedora on and off for a long time. Actually, Fedora would be my second choice of distro. I think DNF is great. It's despite what Thomas may complain about. DNF actually works real well. I would say it's second only. Things are falling around me. It's literally something just fell. I have no idea what happened. So I'd say DNF is second only to Zypper as far as package managers go in my estimation, my book. So I've used GNOME mostly with Fedora because that's their default. And this time I wanted to use a spin, or I wanted to use KDE. I want to see how they did KDE. And the reason I didn't go with Fedora, what year is it? 2019. About 8 years ago, I went SUSE, is because Fedora didn't really have as good of a KDE as SUSE did, and that's really actually why I went SUSE. So I want to try the spin, and so at first I had a hard time finding the spins. I had to go down to the little footnote area to find the spins. And then, so found the spins, downloaded it. And I had to download it twice because the first time it took like 3 hours to download 1.4 gig of an ISO, and I didn't understand why. So I got tired of waiting, so I ran an update on my system because Saturdays when I usually run my zipper dump for Tumbleweed and my stuff. So so that all finished much quicker, even though I have the Arduino package for doing Arduino development stuff. That's like a 1 gigabyte download just by itself. So that actually downloaded faster than the Fedora spin, which that kind of annoyed me just in and of itself. But outside of that, I don't think it's as good of a KDE as OpenSUSE, but again, I'm biased there. But honestly, outside, I mean, really, Fedora is really well put together. I like their tools. Okay, sure, maybe some of their GUIs are a little bit goofy. They kind of have their own Fedora-isms, and I'm fine with that. You know, if they want to swap everything around and put the done instead of okay and all these other like little strange terminology, fly your nerd flag. That's fine. I'm cool with that. But it's well put together. It's very solid. I honestly, truthfully, if OpenSUSE just disappeared, someone messed with the timeline and there was no SUSE, I would be on Fedora instantly after that. So it's great. I would take it. I would take it over any of the Ubuntu's or Debian without a question.
Well, what you were alluding to was some of the people in the Telegram group were talking about the installer and how it's not as user-friendly.
It's different.
Because of the fact that the next or the continuation to the next screen is not always in the same place. Maybe up top, the next screen, maybe down at the bottom. That was one of the complaints about it.
Yeah, it was rough. And actually, one thing I liked about the installer was it actually started the installation process before I put in my root and user information. That's the only installer that does that. And I thought, wow, you're being really efficient with my time. Thank you, Fedora. Thank you for actually having an awesome installer that pretty much, I think that as much as I love SUSE, I think that SUSE could use some of those little things and, they could take from Fedora a little bit since Fedora's taken tons of stuff from SUSE with the build service and OpenQA and stuff like that. So, but maybe not the build service. OpenQA, I know that. So, I think it's just really well done. I think it was, it's very, a lot of new. The packages are a lot newer than you get out of your Ubuntu's, but obviously because they have a 6 to 9 month cadence, something like that. I didn't really look into that. Someone Fedora tell me, is it?
Well, they'll update the packages probably throughout. You'll see those kind of on a rolling, but not really. Throughout the cycle, they're on a 9 month kind of cycle for the most part. When they do releases, and so you'll see packages kind of roll out throughout.
That's a really good point. I do appreciate that the packages were pretty close to like latest release.
Yep,
that was a nice thing.
And I also appreciate, and I know this is going to be contrary to another Thomas thing. I'm not doing Thomas bashing today, but it just I like Thomas. He makes me laugh. So they do a very why not?
We all like you, Thomas.
We do.
You are you. That's why we like you. Otherwise, don't stop being you.
I'm just joking around. Please continue.
But I like the fact that Fedora keeps things very vanilla. Now, I know like people like to customize this or dash to dock or they want a KDE to be a certain way. Like Ubuntu does a nice. They probably do more polished. I'm not going to lie, but I actually like the fact that they do keep it vanilla because it's kind of like this is your basic. This is your stripped down pickup truck. You got vinyl flooring. It's a stick shift, and you build it up the way you like it. And I kind of like that way of doing it slightly better than they've already thought it out for me. But that again, that's me. That's I just said in the message, I like Legos because you give me the box of Legos and I build my set. But I have the framework there, but I can then alter that to kind of suit me. I don't want to buy a plastic toy that once I break it, I can't fix it. That's kind of how I look at it. And so that's Linux for me. So Fedora does a great job of Linux for me. That's it.
Nice. All right, Colin, you are up, sir.
Yes, I spent a lot of the week doing a lot of installs of Fedora. I was going through setups of doing a screen recording to do the install and things to do after installing Fedora 29, and it became apparent that trying to get Simple Screen Recorder in prior to doing everything was becoming a real hassle. And don't forget, if you're running the GNOME desktop, make sure you log out and go into Xorg because it's Wayland by default. So a couple of times I was caught out on that. And, you know, you install, you just forget that it's on Wayland. But I'm surprised no one's mentioned Fedi yet, because Fedi is quite awesome. And that's a very good way to install a lot of things on Fedora. It's got a whole heap of stuff in there. There is a place where you can download the RPM file, and you run that, and it'll open up in Software Center, and you install it, and it gives you the option of installing a lot of other things, especially all your multimedia and your codecs and stuff like that. So that little program there is very awesome. So it even gives you themes, utilities, and all sorts of stuff. So I'm surprised no one's actually mentioned that. But once you use the install, I'm not a fan of the installer, but once you've used it a few times, it's you get a little bit used to it. I suppose it's like anything, isn't it? You use it a few times, it becomes easy. But I have to admit, I did find DNF a little bit slow, but also had inconsistencies with DNF. There is a couple of lines that you can put in your dnf.conf script to find your fastest mirrors. But even with that, I found a couple of inconsistency and a little bit of inconsistent behavior. I was getting sometimes two kilobytes per second. And I think it depends which repo it's pulling from. It was a bit odd. So I have to agree with Thomas. I did find that a bit slow, and sometimes I found it okay. So it was very inconsistent. But I've had no problems with it. I'm on it today. I installed Zoom through Fedi. It took a little while to install, but did it flawlessly. And I've also got Telegram installed that no problem as well. So for me, so far, I don't have NVIDIA. I've got Radeon, AMD. So it seems to be running okay. And Dr. Dash, Thomas, what is this? Dr. Dash? What's that?
So Dr. Dash is a GNOME extension. If you load up raw Ubuntu 1804, you know that panel on the left side?
Yeah.
That is a modified version of Dr. Dash.
Actually, Dash to Doc, but
Dash to Doc. I always get those two mixed.
Dash to Doc. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. I always get those two mixed up.
Right. So you're talking Dash to Doc. Is that what you were talking about? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. If you try Dash to Panel, you'll find probably a better experience because it does give you like a Windows type layout down the bottom, and it's quite good as well. So you can give that if you like that type of thing. Otherwise, that's fine. But yeah, I've been using it. Not a problem. Just had to do my video on VirtualBox, that's all. So installing and things. But I've found it at the moment not too bad.
Nice. Very nice. All right, John, did you get to try out Fedora 29 this week?
I did not try it out this week, but when 29, about the time frame that 29 first came out, since I have to deal with a lot of CentOS boxes and Red Hat boxes, I thought, hey, I'll install that and play with it. And I installed it on Metal. It was i5, 16 gig, 250 gig SSD, like a 1050 NVIDIA card. It installed fine, updated fine. And I had just started a Grafana Docker project. And like Eric said, Docker was a pain in the rump for me trying to install it, and I gave it an hour or so, and then I killed it and put in Ubuntu Monte on it and had Docker on and was good to go. So that's how long Fedora lasted on my machine.
Hey, this is all about the experiences. Like, this is not a Fedora bashing session. This is just about everybody's user experience and what they've gone through with it. Some are good and some are bad. Yours wasn't real good.
For me, I mean, I have to do work on my computer, so I mean, I'd still be on Solus if it actually worked. I just ran into too many problems. Put Ubuntu Monte on, and I can get my work done. So that's just how it is for me.
Yeah.
I just get work done.
Yep. All right, Dave. What do you think? Fedora 29?
It installed real nice, updated real nice, but I had a week of massive tech issues, not all of them computer related, and I didn't have time to play with it enough to get an honest feel for it, other than it felt really solid and what I saw of it was really good. The installer was basically like OpenSUSE, so I felt right at home in that, going to do it again. But beyond that, I didn't have time to make an honest opinion on it.
Good. Very good. Steve, what'd you think?
Sorry about the mic earlier. I forgot I was playing around earlier.
Oh, that's all right, man.
I wanted to do KDE because I hadn't really done KDE much, and I've done GNOME like with Ubuntu and that, but I couldn't get it to install. I don't know if there was an issue with the ISO that I downloaded. The checksum seemed to be fine. So I went, because I had downloaded both that and a GNOME, and I downloaded the GNOME, got that to install. The installer was difficult after using like the Ubuntu installer and that. I had a lot of tips from Sergey. He was on my stream Friday morning, but I wanted to do it as a new noob, just going through it. I couldn't figure out about reclaiming the drive. I got that fixed, got it installed. First off the bat, it is gorgeous. I mean, Fedora, it is, they have done a really nice job with it. For some reason, it looks better than Ubuntu's GNOME. But the login screen, all the choices in that are really nice. First thing I did was get on the tweak tool, turned it to I had a lot of dark. I wanted to start making a video, and well, there was no simple screen recorder, all those. Had to learn about RPM Fusion, had to jump through a bunch of hoops, getting codecs and all that installed. Then found out that it was on the Wayland session because I know nothing about Wayland. Had to boot out, come back in, and that. So from a new perspective, it was difficult. I mean, it's a well-polished system. It is really nice looking, and I really did start getting a little used to the GNOME flow. At least that super key is working. I'm happy because that's what I use. But it's definitely not for anybody just coming over to Linux. Definitely not.
No, I would totally agree with you. It's not. It's definitely not for somebody new user.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you laugh at the same?
Go ahead, Eric.
At the same comment. It's amazing you have that.
Yes, I did.
I thought so. Okay.
Sorry, I wasn't laughing at you, Steve. I was trying to read his comment. Tyler, did you get to try Fedora?
No, I did not have time over this last week.
It's all good, brother. What have you been doing?
Let's see. Last Saturday I did overtime, and I did overtime last night. So
there you go. Real life is kicking in.
Yep.
All right, Scott, you made it this week, brother.
I did.
Good to see you, man.
Sorry, Thanks. I've been absent lately due to medical issues, but all good now. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to try it, so we don't have to waste any time on me doing Fedora.
All right, no problem.
Love the logo you got in the background there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I try to keep on topic anyway.
Carl, you the man.
Yeah, Fedora's one of my favorites. Definitely, it was my second distro I ever had. I went from Linux Mint, was my very first distro back in the day, back in like 09 or something like that, and then Fedora was my very second. And so I learned a lot playing with Fedora for quite a long time. And then I found Karora, and Karora took Fedora and took all the headaches away, and it was very well done. And so I used that for a long time, 2-3 years, probably solid, and then became more adventurous and tried out everything else under the sun after that. But now Fedora is like home sweet home, and every complaint you hear, DNF is a little slower, I think. it's I know Pac-Man's way faster than DNF, and but every complaint is mostly just GNOME, and I love GNOME, and Rocco knows I love GNOME. I used GNOME for years, but it was
Talk to me about the GNOME workflow, dude.
I know that's all it is, but it has gotten to the point. I don't know. I'm on an NVIDIA card right now, which I'm not happy about. I let my nephew borrow my AMD card, and it is GNOME it crashed 4 times the night I installed it, and so I installed Deepin on it, and it's been fine ever since. So I'm running Deepin on Fedora, and it runs like a champ. I'm running Fedora on this right now.
Well, hearing the problems that Vash had and Eric had about the Cinnamon version, I'm glad I didn't actually download the Cinnamon ISO and just install it over the GNOME, because the GNOME had no problems installing. So,
right.
But I enjoy using the Cinnamon, dude. I'll tell you what, I thought about it this week, and I had mentioned a few of the problems that I've had, but those are no more any problems than I've had on Ubuntu distros or Arch distros. It's just you got to work through some things. And I was mad at myself that I only put it on the test distro, the test drive that I have, and not my main drive, because I would probably continue using it.
Mm-hmm.
So Kevin in the chat wanted to reiterate that the installer and the buttons moving around was done intentionally by Fedora. I don't know that for 100% sure, but that's what he's saying, that it was done intentional so that you think about and make sure you know what you want to do before you do it. You just don't click next.
Right.
There you go.
And that's why they have the reclaim space button on the, when it says you only have 500 megabytes left on your drive and you have to reclaim space in order to make space to install it.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just all of a sudden click on, your SDA drive and gone, whatever's, it's kind of a little fail safe.
Yep.
And the default file system it selects is LVM, not a standard partition too, I noticed.
Right.
Yeah.
I noticed that on all installers, when you do a manual partitioning, unless they're using, unless they want you to use ButterFS, I've noticed that they're using LVM, and that was on last week's on. Geez, so quickly I forget. Whatever last week's was,
2 weeks,
or 2 weeks, yeah. That was Salient. That's it. And the one before, I had to select no. I wanted to not use the volume management.
So, anybody else want to make any more comments on Fedora?
Just wanted to comment that in the distro to IRC, they are a bit against our opinion.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, why are we so trashing Fedora? And this,
I don't know why you guys are trashing Fedora. I had a good experience on it.
2 days of distro, 2 days of trying isn't really Fedora experience.
Well,
I want to say one. Oh, sorry.
Like I said before, is I've been trying different distros and VMs and on various hardware, but I always come back to Fedora. It's like a good shoe for me. It's a good fit. I know what I'm doing in it. I don't have a problem with it. Someone else has a problem with it and they don't like it. I don't begrudge them for wanting to try something else. I mean, it's kind of what this is about. Find what you can work with and find what you like. Yeah.
I'm going to echo Rocco's comment and just say no distribution is perfect, right? No desktop environment is perfect. It doesn't exist. Windows isn't perfect. Mac isn't perfect. Linux isn't perfect. Nothing is, right? There's always a compromise. There are ones that are less problematic, especially if you have a specific workflow. And that's why there's choice. That's why people gravitate toward one or the other. There are people that love every one of the distributions that any of us have tried over the years, and that's great. That's important, right? I mean, they wouldn't be doing the work if there wasn't. So I don't see it as trashing. I just see it as this is an honest reaction.
Yeah.
And
except of course for Arch, because everybody knows that Arch is perfect.
Of course.
I think.
By the way,
By the way.
And Gentoo sucks.
One thing you got to remember, Rocco, with Fedora, became very apparent to me when that was given to me quite a few years ago, which I told the story last week. It holds true to the free open source, so it doesn't have all the codecs and everything available. So that's why it can be difficult to use because of those reasons. And you need to do a little bit of work to find out how to get those extras in there. And it's not like Ubuntu, and that's the expectation I think a lot of people have if they're coming from the Ubuntu field. And that's what can be very hard to use.
And I will agree with you on that, because I'm coming from Ubuntu, and I've been using Ubuntu since maybe 2011. And those are certain things that I expect. And then that makes, there's probably, if I hadn't come from Ubuntu and I came from some other distro, I might have said, oh, okay, that's not a big deal. But I don't think you could take Fedora and say to a new user, okay, you've loaded it, whatever, there you go, guys. And, they'd flip out. They wouldn't know what to do because they're used to seeing everything they need. They wouldn't know where to find stuff, I think, in the beginning.
Well, that's kind of why on my ham radio operator.
Google.
Yeah, but I'll tell you, the average user, they go in, they look in Google, and they go, I don't understand what that means. So, you've got to look at it that way, too. We're coming from a background of knowledge and experience that the typical user doesn't have.
No.
And that's what we have to keep in mind. And so that's why I kind of look at the things, if I was like a new user and I'm looking at Fedora and it's like, I can't even see the videos. I can get to them, but I can't see them. So how would I get to them?
That's also one of the reasons why I hate the response of read the fucking manual. Sorry, I read
I know what you're saying.
And so I find that probably the most disingenuous thing and something that turns something off, somebody off. I work desktop support as for a living in a Windows environment, in a very, very, let's say, engineer-heavy environment. And so when you say, oh, you can't do that because of this, they'll immediately try to railroad you in going into another direction, which you say, well, we can't because, our corporate overlords have dictated that we can't do that. And they'll say, why? But the fact, what I was trying to say with that is I look at it from a customer service point, is that if someone wants to learn Fedora or something else that's more difficult than just point and click, and I have that knowledge and they want my help, I am more than willing to help them out, even if it is a simple, okay, you need to look at this, and I will help you interpret what's being said there.
Well, the other thing too is when we're trying these distros, we should all rely on the people that in the community to help out who have a lot of experience with whatever distro we're working with. Like Chris, you have a lot of experience with Fedora, Adam as well. This week I had talked to him about installing NVIDIA drivers, what's the best way, because you can search the internet and have 10 different opinions on what the best way to install the NVIDIA drivers are on Fedora 29. I'm just saying. So there is a best practice way to do that on each different distro. And I think some of the problems that each of you guys had this week would probably have been easier had we just reached out to each other and talked a little bit about them and could have gained some insight from the more experienced users on Fedora.
Well, I was getting a lot of advice from Sergey, and I didn't really, and not that I didn't want to take it, I just wanted to do it on my own to see what I have learned. I found some of the stuff relatively quick. It's just aggravating when some things work. Like it was as simple as you get in a desktop and the touchpad, touch to click was not working. You had to go activate it. Why? Well,
that's a plasma thing.
Yeah.
I think you got to remember one thing too. When it comes to Ubuntu, one thing I've noticed over the years is it's one of the most popular distros within the Linux community, but also it can confuse people to come over and use stock Ubuntu because it doesn't have Ubuntu restricted extras installed by default. It doesn't tell you anywhere to click it and install this to make your life a lot easier. So that's another thing as well that's confusing to people. They put in a DVD, it doesn't work and all that sort of thing. So that's another thing you've got to remember as well. So a lot of the derivatives that are spun off Ubuntu have these things in there to make people's lives easier. So you've got to remember that as well. It can be confusing. It was for me when I started using Ubuntu the first time. So even now, it still doesn't have it. You've got to install it.
There's two things. I was actually just going to say, I want to make clear that someone said that we were bashing Fedora. I don't think we were bashing Fedora, but the underpinnings of Fedora are really, really, really solid. Like, it's a really solid technical base. And to me, that's the most important piece of any Linux distribution. If some of the stuff on top needs some tidying up, oh well, that's not a big deal. But it's really solid, I think.
Frank, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, so one of the things we've had a little bit of complaining about is the Anaconda installer. And it's actually really, really good installer. I just think if you're coming out of a Ubuntu specific mode and you're used to seeing the way Ubuntu is doing all their installs, it's a little bit different. It's got several different panels on the screen, but there's nothing. It's a very powerful installer. And and I think that's also one of the downfalls is you can really you can mess yourself up if you're just going next is all you're used to. And it gives you a little bit more that you can do. It's really a really good installer. And then to go back to one of the things about, I don't know how to do this when I get into Fedora, or I don't know how to do something when I get into Ubuntu. One of the things I think that Mate has really, really done is that welcome screen. Everybody laughs at it and says no one uses it. It goes away, but it's probably the most detailed information for a new user. I'm new to Linux. I need to go through here. Oh, I want to install DVD support. I click this button and it does it. And I think maybe that we need to, as a community, say maybe something like that in all the OSs that we're going to push to a new user would be really awesome, because it's by far and away the best welcome screen I've ever seen.
I have to agree. The Ubuntu Mate welcome screen added with the software boutique is like an awesome combo. And for people who aren't familiar, people who don't want to spend an hour setting up their system afterwards, it's an awesome thing, and it just works.
I'll throw out there that I think Mint does a really good job on that as well.
I only have one problem with the Anaconda installer. It's that word done, I think, is misleading. It should be definitely next or something, because you're not done when you're selecting something. You want to go to the next part of the installation instead of done. I think that word's just not right. That's the only problem I have with that installer, to be honest. It's just misleading.
About the only
the done
place I can think of that done appears like that would be on when you're doing the partitioning, manual partitioning, and you want to say, yeah, I'm done with the manual partitioning. I'm trying to think everywhere else I've seen next. When you select keyboard, when you select when you put the username in, and that I'll give you one thing on Anaconda. That the first couple times trying Anaconda, I got really confused on why I wasn't able to set my host name, my default username and stuff like that. But I've done it so many times now that it's second nature. I don't even think about it.
There's a level of trust you gain when you use an installer enough times. And I know I agree the danger of next, but when you understand how it works and you trust that so my perspective is, years ago, graphical installers were not trustworthy or reliable. You would often destroy partitions, bad things could happen, right? And so I still don't trust graphical installers as much as I do. Go install Ubuntu server. That is perfect. End curses, bam, I love it. That's all I want. I don't need all the rest of it. So anyway, my point is, I just, when it's different, it makes me jump back, and I had the same reaction to OpenSUSE as well, because it was just so different. It was like, what do you mean I have to go in and tell it to connect to my Wi-Fi in this really strange way? And anyway, I mean, that's not a bad thing if you're used to it, like Chris is saying, but it's just different, and maybe different is good in some ways, but jarring in others. So,
well, wait, you're saying you installed it through wireless and not plugged in with wires?
No. In the OpenSUSE installer, when I wanted to load my, you were joking.
That's kind of yeah. I'm trying to say I always plug mine in because I don't trust wireless in general.
Oh, gotcha.
Well,
that's just me.
I will say for the installer, I did partition the partitions ahead of time. Or G-parted in another system. I don't usually trust the installer. For some reason, and that is a failing in Linux in general, I think, that sometimes the partitions don't work out real well when you're trying to manually partition in the installer itself.
Well, Anaconda does it pretty well, because I did all mine manually. But I was on a disk that I could just use and mess around with anyway, so it didn't matter, which is a good thing when you do those sorts of things, because you get to know how it does handle those type of things. But when I'm talking about the next button, it's mainly on that first screen where you select your disk. It says done. That should be next. That should be next. But when you go into the next screen and you're finished doing your partitions, then that should be done. That makes sense. But the first one should be next. That's the only thing I think is. I
think that, like, the way I interpret it, and it's just me, but when you went to a section, and when you're done with that section, you said done, and then you go back to the main screen, that section.
Well, and it's non-linear.
Then you're done.
Right?
It's non-linear. Yes, exactly.
Right, and so you're essentially just filling out forms. For every little thing, you're just filling out a form. Okay, I want to do a manual partition. I want to do this. Okay, done with that. Now it takes you to the manual partition.
True.
Done.
That makes sense now that you mention it. It's probably just the way I interpret it, probably, I would say.
Well, because you're used to that linear flow.
Right.
You have the other installer. But this is like a pick and choose. Do you want to go here? It's like, this is more of a choose your own adventure.
I have one more piece of praise for Anaconda just before we go. So something I've noticed on, let's say, I mentioned that I went and installed Manjaro. So if you have a block of open space on a disk in Anaconda, you can just say automatically create using that block of space versus having to manually partition. If you try to do the same thing on, let's say, Manjaro, it only gives you the choice to either resize an existing installation, replace it, or something else. So it doesn't, it's not smart enough to just say, hey, there's a big chunk of space, let me use that. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Plus, it takes up way too much room for swap.
Yeah.
What did it take up, John?
I mean, any Arch base like Arco or Manjaro or whatever, dude, they're like 3 times whatever RAM you've got installed, and they want to set it up as swap. And
it's for hibernation.
They're about to try to get rid of it.
Yeah, there's a reason that they do it.
Problem.
Yeah,
not really.
Yeah, but
Calamaris, the base Calamaris does that. So base Calamaris likes to do that because of as Eric said, hibernation and stuff like that.
Right, but I think Anaconda only does whatever size RAM you have.
You really only need you need an equal amount of swap to the amount of RAM you have. But if you want to do a swap file, that works perfectly fine. I know and I know there's some people they don't even use swap at all. Which, if you don't want to bother with suspend or hibernate, perfectly fine. I mean, as long as you don't hit your maximum amount of RAM, it's not going to.
You actually only need it for suspend because hibernate writes to the disk, not to the RAM.
Yeah, but you also do need it because in some instances, when you are when you're doing something that takes up a lot of RAM, and Android does this way worse than normal Linux does, but it takes certain processes that you have running in your memory and moves it to the swap partition or file that you have, and it frees up that space so that anything else that runs can take up that space and use it. But if you have a lot of RAM, it's not going to matter. So if you have like 64 or 128 gigs, doesn't matter. You can just put it in sleep. It's fine. But if you have your computer running for an extremely long amount of time, or you want to use Hibernate, you're going to need to use swap. So it's really, do you want that functionality or not? And do you have the memory to allow you to do that?
Well, I have 16 gigabytes of memory, and most distros want to set up a swap. Some I do and some I don't. I've never known to have an issue from not having swap that I know of. But like, I created the swap with Fedora just because, and it never gets used. I mean, it hasn't been used yet. So
what I typically do is,
because I don't have enough memory on this system.
What I typically do is on a laptop, I will allow it to have the same amount of RAM as I plan to have in the laptop. So in this laptop I'm using right now, I have 8 gigabytes of RAM. However, I have it set up to have 16 gigabytes of swap because I plan on upgrading it to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and just going ahead and doing that just saves me the time later. But on a desktop, I won't do that. On a desktop, I'll give it a gigabyte of swap max because I don't ever put desktops into Hibernate. But by doing that, if I do something that takes for a long time, or if I start hitting my maximum amount of RAM, it can use the swap. And I've never seen swap use more than 100 megabytes, 200 megabytes-ish. So by doing a gigabyte, most of the time I'm perfectly fine.
And really, if you want to speed up performance on something that's using a swap, if you can add a second drive, just an old junk drive that you're not using anymore, and you throw a big swap file out there, and you won't see a whole lot of hit on performance because you're now not having to share the drive with the system as well.
Yeah, the only thing you really got to watch out for on swap is if you have an older SSD, you don't want to put your swap on that.
No,
because older SSDs
will fail.
That area will fail. But if you have a newer SSD, it's not as big of an issue. Well, let me rephrase that. Newer SSDs of a certain type will be less of an issue. That gets into more of a hard, like how they're manufactured, but some of the newest ones that use a special new technology that gives you a higher capacity, you don't want to do that with them because they are more susceptible to failure. But there's like a golden age of your SSDs where you do want to put your swap on the SSD for higher performance and it won't kill your SSD. But any older on that SSD, and you don't want to do that because it'll kill it, and any newer on the SSD, you don't want to do that because it'll kill it.
I'll chalk one up for the spinning drives then.
Yeah, spinning drives just in general. If you
What's
want
a spinning drive?
Like a hard disk drive.
Something we don't use anymore. Well, actually, I do. I do use them for
spinning rust.
What is this floppy drive of which you speak?
All right.
A really archaic thing.
Yeah.
It used to be 11 inches across.
Any other comments on Fedora before we move on? Okay.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
All right. So we need to pick a distro for next week before we move on.
Didn't I see Vector Linux?
No,
in
wait.
the chat?
If you check out Distro Watch, the main page for all distros in Linux.
So,
the one that everybody goes by. Rosa came out with a new release. If you want to try it,
I don't know what distro
Not that again.
actually has it besides Arch or maybe even Tumbleweed, but GNOME 3.32 just came out. If we just wanted to do a desktop environment.
I'm open to that. There's nothing wrong with doing just a desktop environment.
That sounds cool.
I'm really curious. They say there's a lot of improvements. And
Is there anything that's
hoping it's true, but I'm not holding my breath.
But
is there anything out there that's using version 5 of the kernel?
Yeah, Arches.
Arch, yeah.
Tumbleweed.
Ubuntu 19.4 will too.
Now, in order to get the latest GNOME, we would have to do an Arch, would we not?
Yeah.
Is there any other? Is there anything else that would?
Debian Unstable you could use. I'm pretty sure.
Tumbleweed. would be the other one.
Debian Unstable or Arch.
Yeah.
Fedora magazine said you could test it.
I'd say let's go with the with Arch.
All right. Well, how's this? How about this? I guess it really doesn't matter which distro you try it on.
Yep.
However way you want to do it, whether you want to do an Arch or whether you want to try testing in Fedora or whether you want to do OpenSUSE or Debian Unstable, it doesn't really matter. How about we all just try GNOME and see and just check it out and give our opinions on it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Sounds good.
I'll do that.
I know some of you. Well, I know some of you are not fond of GNOME, but I think that again, I'll have to say, rely on the people in the Telegram group for suggestions and tips and stuff like that, because there are a lot of people that have a lot of knowledge and can ease the pain of trying something new. So
3.2, right?
How can there be a lot of people with knowledge?
3.32.
There's GNOME 2, GNOME 3. Which one are you doing? Which version?
It would be GNOME. It would be GNOME 3, 3.32.
Rocco, there's a lot of people with knowledge, but not many people use GNOME, so I'm not sure how many people with knowledge.
Carl's been using GNOME for a long time. He loves it.
Yeah.
I use GNOME, and maybe we're the only two, Carl. I don't know. Can you make up somebody right now?
Definitely not Michael.
No, definitely not Michael. Actually, Dosgeek was enjoying GNOME there for a while, so he may be another one to talk to. Right. But there's people that know workarounds, or maybe that can even explain the workflow itself of GNOME, because there is a specific workflow in GNOME, and if you get used to it, it's really good. Well, Chris, you use GNOME, don't you?
I've used GNOME. I'm currently using Cinnamon.
Oh, okay, all right.
But I mean, I was using GNOME probably for close to probably 5 or 6 years, but I wasn't really getting into doing workflows on it. I would get a couple screens in there, but as far as doing, let's say, like a Qt or GTK or something like that, that's not something I've ever tried before.
Well, if I can make a suggestion for some of you guys, definitely okay to try out in a virtual box, all right? But if you want to try it out and you're undecided, because I see Dolphin said that 3.30 is in unstable, so 3.32 is not there yet in Debian.
Oh, is that right?
So if you're
3.4 is out right now.
If you're looking to install GNOME or use GNOME this week, Salient OS would be a great choice. I know we just reviewed it the other week, but it's a great operating system. It's Arch, and Silent has it, set up for you pretty well done, so you don't have to do anything.
It's really dialed in for sure.
Yeah so it would be an easy way to try out GNOME 3.32.
Is he using the GDM as a greeter, or like DM?
He's switching to light. He's switching to light DDM. Light DM.
Yeah. When we tested it, he was using SSDM, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but
he switched. He just switched it. That was part of our feedback, and he said he was changing over to light DM.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't actually matter what it uses. Generally, it does a desktop manager, Win login manager. GNOME can work with light DM.
I think that Disciple mentioned in chat about Manjaro. I don't know if they have it or if they're holding it. A lot of times they'll hold things back for a week or two. So I don't know.
It's probably in unstable repos, but not in testing and stable. I know that. But it's probably in unstable. Other good option would be Arca. It probably has. That's very probably set up with 332, his own version.
Wendy said that it was XFCE of Salient OS, but you can install other desktops very easily on that. So it's like one command in the terminal to install the GNOME desktop. What are you going to say, Dave?
When are we seeing this workflow video for GNOME that you're making?
Oh,
he's waiting for us to write it.
Dude, there's been so many things that I wanted to do for videos that it's just no time, man. There's just no time.
There's a pixel out of place in his clock, and until he gets it fixed, he just doesn't have the time.
Okay, but the other thing is too, until I get this OBS issues done, I can't make any videos because my profile, like I said, we're messed up. So I have to redo everything, and it may be a while. You got a Snickers? Just saying.
So
I wish.
It's funny that Thomas mentioned the keyboard command. So I think the workflow GNOME, especially on a desktop or laptop, if you use your keyboard to navigate, you can really, it is there. I mean, it's totally there in terms of like being able to get back and forth, different desktops. I mean, it's quick. I used Pop OS for a while, and they used GNOME, and
yeah,
you really get into it. You do.
Yeah, and I will say, my whole thing about keyboard shortcuts came about because I used Unity for the longest time, and then when it was dropped, I went straight to GNOME. So that kind of grew on me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
but that's the workflow. I would say if you're using a mouse, you'll probably be less efficient or maybe frustrated.
Yeah,
it's definitely geared towards keyboard use. You may or may not be a fan of the full screen menu, but there are other things that you can do, like turn off the animations and speed up. There's actually an extension you can install to speed up. That's called Impatience, I think.
Impatience, yeah.
And it will take away some of the animations and stuff like that. So, like I said, just rely on the people around to, if you don't like something, say something in Telegram, and maybe we can fix it or help you through it.
I know I'll be asking questions because the one thing that has ever bothered me about GNOME, I love most of it, but the way it handles multi-monitors. It's like disjointed. Everything gets switched on the main monitor and the other one just sits.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Is it Fedora, GNOME?
Fedora uses GNOME.
Yeah, but it doesn't have the latest version unless you're on Rawhide.
Yeah, it doesn't have 3.32 GNOME in it. So
3.3 it says.
3.32
the latest release is 3.32.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
And there's supposed to be some really, really good changes in it. I don't know, but there's supposed to be really good changes.
Yeah, I think from what I understand, they got some of the patches that Ubuntu put in upstream finally.
Wait, can I say fractional scaling? I mean, really? It's about time, Jeez.
It's going to be amazing.
All right.
Actually, 3.4 is the latest out, but if you want the Arch Linux, it's GNOME 3.32. If you want the Debian, it's 3.22. If you want the Gen 2, it's 3.24.
So are you talking about the fractional scaling? That actually only applies to Wayland.
Yep, it only applies to Wayland.
Rip.
Of course.
Now, I do have a question about that, though, because on Fedora, when you go into the little cog on the login manager, and it brings up, like either GNOME or whatever other desktop environments you have. Usually it has an Xorg session or a Wayland session, but it doesn't have that on mine. All it has is
because
GNOME.
you install the NVIDIA drivers.
Yeah, you install the NVIDIA driver, and there's a UDEV rule that disables Wayland. Disables the Wayland session when it detects the NVIDIA driver.
Okay.
So you're running on Xorg.
Right. So it does. So I have no option to run Wayland.
You can disable that. You can comment out that UDEV rule and comment out the enable Wayland false comment in the GDM custom config. And if you install EGL streams, you can get Wayland working under NVIDIA. However, it's not a spectacular experience.
Yeah.
So it's probably not worth it.
No.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just don't ever use Wayland with NVIDIA. I think everybody who has NVIDIA knows this.
Right.
Or should know this. If I used it as like a fallback because it does run, it just doesn't run well. So
something go Team Red.
Okay, so we're going to try GNOME 3.32, but I want to continue on with at least a couple people of last week I started asking people where they started in Linux and how they got started, what made them try Linux in the first place. And I want to continue on this week, and we'll try to get a few more people. If I call your name and you've already talked about it, just chalk it up as a old person moment for me, and just tell me you already told me. Paul, do you want to start out of where you started in Linux?
Yeah, I remember Linux from back in the day. I had a book and it came with Knoppix. That was the most I ever knew of it, was Knoppix.
What made you want to try it?
Because it came on a disk and you could run it on a computer, but not overwrite your Windows.
Right.
So yeah, I could use this disk. I wish I still had it. It was a long time ago. But then maybe a year ago, I hadn't used Linux since that disk. Until about a year ago, because I want to try to set up a Myth TV with the antenna. But that's one of my projects, Myth TV. So that's why.
Can I just ask a question? How did you find out what was the I don't know what led you to Linux? Where did you see it? What was the underlying factor that drove you to Linux? How did you hear about it? That's what I'd like to know.
Well, I'm a Windows user through and through. I still use Windows. Linux is like a
right. So did you hear about it in a shop or just on YouTube?
No, it was a book I bought back in the day.
A book you bought.
Little discs. They had Knoppix.
Wobbly. It's just the book. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was in the book.
Yep. That was in the book. That's why I still have the book, but I don't have the disc that was in it.
Yep.
But yeah, that's one of my projects, Myth TV. Get that up and running.
All right. Frank, where'd you start in Linux? Where'd you first hear about Linux?
I first heard about Linux in, I guess, some magazine talking about Red Hat. And I picked up, God, I can't even remember what version of it was, with Running Linux, O'Reilly's Running Linux. And picked up, I guess, CompUSA had a box set of Red Hat CDs. And that was I had an old, like Pentium 60. And that was the only extra computer I had. And we were still on, I can't remember if I was still on dial-up or DSL. And I just remember the awesome feeling that I got when I got network working on that. And I was working in, let's say, Windows IT support, help desk, and I always wanted to do more, and it seemed like to be the best way to get there. And when you do, I mean, Windows is Windows, and it's good to say it's terrible and everything else, but in an enterprise situation with users, there's some things that it does okay. And it led me to get the Unix, and it led me to Solaris, which is an interesting introduction to enterprise Linux when you're going to be the backup admin and everything's on Solaris. And one of the things that I first learned, everybody thinks Vi and Vim is the same thing. It's not. And if you run Vim commands that you learned in Linux on an old school Solaris box, things don't always go the way you planned. And those Solaris systems we ran back then, everything was done as root. And that's where I learned my first troubleshooting was, what did I just do? And then I worked on a lot of Red Hat boxes. I switched out a bunch of Solaris boxes to Red Hat boxes. And then I took a little bit of a break because I got really fed up with enterprise IT and became something different. And then I came back and did Windows backup administration, which was very, very, very interesting. So, and then I'm trying to go back to my roots and be a person that loves the desktop, because that's one of the things that I got annoyed with. If you do support for long enough, you can sometimes hate computers and never want to see them again when you go home, and never turn them on except maybe to play video games. And I got to that point for a little while, and I'm trying to be better.
Yeah. Well, John just put up a Solaris thing. John, what's your experience with that, man?
Well, I was in the Air Force in the early 80s, like 82-ish, and we had Sun OS boxes. And then I started college, and they didn't have CS degrees back then. You took a double E, and one of my professors had this thing called Minix, and it was on floppy disk. And I'm like, so you can run Unix on a x86 platform? And so I was all over that. But I think, if I remember right, that was like 35.25-inch floppies or something to get Minix installed, something like that. So then I got out of the Air Force in 92-ish. It was an HP Unix admin. And then I discovered something called Slackware. And you could run Unix-like operating system on your PC. And it's been Linux ever since.
Nice. So both of you guys, you and Frank, had the technical background. Were in like IT admin scenarios where you just had the urge to continue on learning more about computers themselves. Am I correct or what?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was at work all day. You could run Unix, which was perfect. And then at home, like I think I had the Amiga computer back then. You couldn't run anything like that at home. So Linux was awesome. I mean, that was life-changing to me.
Right.
It was pretty much the same for me. I worked one of the first real Linux jobs that I had. It was all the various Unix forms, and we got to run our own systems. So we all ran, it was an office of several people, and we pushed each other running different things. And I stupidly left that job and took a better job. And that's when I got introduced to my Windows laptop. And now this is how I'm going to interface with all the Unix systems I'm going to administer. And unfortunately, I found a lot of Unix admins are forced to use Windows and run very, very, very large Linux and Unix environments off of a Windows box. And I did get to learn PuTTY. So, and I think it's just that thing where if you're in a situation where you can run, like some of the guys today are, especially with the way things have changed, we've got a lot of your admin guys are running Unix boxes now. And they're running, stuff like i3 and multiple text config managers so it's very simple. But I mean, there was a point where I was doing work for customers who the requirement was you can only connect to our system if you're on Windows X. And it's not that the VPN client or whatever only ran on this. This is what the client said. And that got passed down to us. And so you can get frustrated when you're not able to use some of the cool stuff that you want to use. And you're just kind of stuck on a Windows box, doing stuff on Unix. All the friends that you left behind were doing cool Linux stuff. And then you kind of lose the desktop Linux stuff. Because you come home if you're doing it and you're kind of, at least I got frustrated at work. And then I'm going to get home. I've been using a Windows box all day. Why don't I just keep using it and just kind of let it steamroll? And, but one of the funny things I found out about it is most of the enterprise stuff applies in some sort, but to the desktop, not all of it does. Because when I got really back into it, I was kind of, I could tunnel my X Windows session through SSH back and all this other stuff. But getting X really configured on my desktop the way I wanted it to look was, I forgot how to do this. And wait, it's much easier than it used to be because I'm not going and doing an Xorg config file. It found it. Oh, that's really nice. And I was back when there was no real gaming. You played Chromium BSU and like Xbill, and that was like the games and Frozen Bubble. And now with like Proton, it's like a whole different world.
Yep.
And it's the desktop side has really, really made me happy to be back and trying to use it and be back in the community.
Now, Frank, you're running Linux now? Are you Linux only at home, or do you have Windows machines, or what?
So I enjoy my marital vows. So there are Windows machines that are being used, and
oh yeah,
the laptops, all of my laptops run Linux exclusively. The desktop, which is a shared system, it does have Windows on as its main operating system because someone likes to play certain little silly games, and I like staying married. So
right,
that's.
So you're a filthy dual booter like me.
Oh, the weird thing is, like, I think we talked about it in the gaming section. The only games I play are like GOG games or like retro console games. So it doesn't really make a difference to me. But, I'm not going to, Windows is terrible, but it's not that terrible, especially if you spend the money, go away from 10 home, turn everything off, and, put it on a Pi hole and block lots of different things. Then it's a fine experience until it decides to reboot. And when you can keep on an 1803 for, I think I've been on Windows 10 1803 for a long time now, and I'm dreading when it's going to upgrade me to 1809. But
well, to be honest with you, I don't have the bad experience that everybody has on Windows. Like I said, I only boot into it to play games. It updates when it wants to, and I've never had an issue. So I just, like I said, I'm only in there to play games.
Like I said, like Windows gets a really bad rep about some things. Like, so, there's Active Directory stuff that you have to deal with. I mean, it worked, and Exchange is always, well, at least it's still there for now. So there's all these little things, and I get to play with some. One of the coolest things that I got to deal with Windows, and I know it's Biddle, is Windows 10. I can't remember the actual term. It's like their long-term support version. It's not available to non-enterprise license users, but it's like Windows 10 with everything bad ripped out of it. And it's like, why can't you just offer that as a use experience?
So what your job is, Frankie, we need you to get us an ISO.
Okay. I mean, you can. You can download it from Microsoft. You just can't legally buy a license unless you go to you get yourself an enterprise licensing agreement with them. But it's weird. But it's that it is what it is.
Yep. Well, that's awesome. Good story, man. We're gonna have time for one more before we got to go. So, Thomas, can you keep it brief or not?
That's a good question, actually.
Okay, so
I will do my best.
Do it. Start it.
Okay.
Where'd you start in Linux? Where'd you first hear of Linux?
I first heard of Linux. I was in 6th grade, and there was a workshop that I was invited to where we got to build our own computers with a group of other kids our age. And when we got done building it, the dude who was leading us said, "We're installing Ubuntu." And I'm like, what is Ubuntu? I have no idea what you just said. Is this a foreign language? Did I hear you correctly? And we installed Ubuntu. And at the end of it, one person in every group who had got a computer. I did not get the computer. The next time I encountered Linux, I was in 8th grade, and we had a drawing at our school where if you met certain requirements and you needed a computer, Google gave you a computer. And I was chosen to have one of these computers. And I was given this HP computer, had a gigabyte of RAM, an 80 gigabyte hard drive, and it was running an Ubuntu-based distro called Ubermix, which is meant for students. And they taught me how to use it. I had no idea what I was doing.
And how old were you at this time?
I was in 8th grade.
Okay.
So that gives you an idea. And I went about like that for a year, trying to learn the hard way how to update my computer and things like that. Like, I thought for a good 3 or 4 months, sudo apt-get update was what you did to update your computer. I did not understand the whole upgrade and auto remove thing. I thought you had to manually go into the boot folder and manually delete the kernel files. So you can imagine the number of times I killed my own computer by deleting the current kernel. And at some point, my hard drive started failing. And I asked on Ask Ubuntu, is there a way I can just go get a new hard drive and copy my OS from one drive to another? And a dude responded on there saying, no, you can't do that, just reinstall. I'm just like, okay. Learned the hard way how to make a bootable ISO, and I installed Ubuntu 14.04 on there. And because its desktop was vastly different from Ubermix, I was blown away by Unity. And once I learned how to use it, I loved it. And I used Ubuntu for the longest time. Slowly started learning some programming, and through a lot of programming experience and eventually learning how to actually update Ubuntu, all that stuff. Eventually, I wanted my own computer that was a laptop, and I couldn't do that because I didn't have money. So I ended up getting an external hard drive and installing Ubuntu 16.04 on that, and just booted from USB like that for the longest time, actually. I think I did that for a good year or so. And when I finally saved up enough money, I got my own laptop. And that was actually after I started developing Draugr OS, which I had done because I had tried SteamOS, and SteamOS, I hated it because it was so hard to make an ISO, and it was so locked down, and basically the only computers you could get with it on it would be Steam boxes, and that was it. And it was such a pain to install on something else, a normal user wouldn't bother putting in the effort. So that's why I started Draugr OS and tried to make it something where a more normal computer user could boot it up, use it as a gaming box, and that's what it's meant for. And it's easier to use than SteamOS, and you get easier access to Linux games and stuff like that. And whole other explanation that I'm not going to go into because I don't have time. I will say, after Canonical dropped Unity, I went to GNOME, and I used GNOME for the longest time, but I switched to XFCE a couple years ago, or not a couple years ago, dang it, a couple months ago. And I have been using XFCE since then. And
so are you using Ubuntu?
Yeah. Yes and no. I am using Ubuntu, but I have installed XFCE myself. So It is not technically Ubuntu, but it's about as close as you can get without being Ubuntu.
Yeah, Ubuntu is actually a good experience.
It really is. Yeah. Especially if you know how to use XFCE and you know what you want. Ubuntu is a great experience.
Yep.
So
awesome.
Yeah.
Very awesome. I want to go back. Frank, what are you currently running right now?
So I'm running Ubuntu, and I do have a laptop with Mate on it, and maybe another one with God, what is it? Sorry, Mint XFCE's version. Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Paul, what are you running currently?
I usually run Linux Mint.
Okay. What? The Cinnamon version?
Yeah, Cinnamon. Cinnamon, I call it.
Cinnamon. Yeah. All right. We're out of time. That's all I can say. So we're out of time. We didn't even get to talk to Scrap. We didn't get to talk to you. We didn't get to talk to Pete. We didn't get to talk to Ritual. What's up with that?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I took up all the time.
No, you didn't. Stop it.
took up most of the time.
Partially my fault too. Partially.
Yeah, it's all Thomas's fault. We're just going to blame him.
Of course, it's always my fault. Always my Fedora hate. Even when I'm not here, it's my fault.
It's easy, Thomas. You're easy.
I know. I'm just going with it.
That's why we all like Thomas, because we've got someone to blame.
Yep.
Right.
He takes it so well,
Keep
though.
talking. I'm here.
I'll be here for the after party. It's all good.
Yep. All right. So everybody gets the last word. Paul, last word, brother.
On my book, it was Mandrake.
Oh, Mandrake.
Oh, even better. Mandrake, yes.
It's from 2004. So.
Yep. All right. Frank, last word, brother.
Thank you, Rocco, for doing this, and thank you for having us here. It's really awesome.
Awesome. Thomas, last word, brother.
All right. Thanks for having me on again. It's been fun as always, despite being blamed for everything.
Someone has to be the scapegoat.
I guess.
Or
Check out
the whooping boy.
What?
Remember that GOAT stands for greatest of all time. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. Continue
Check
on,
out
Thomas.
DruggerOS. Check out DruggerOS at druggeros.ml. We are actually having an icon change this week. So if you're running DruggerOS, be watching for that, especially with the beta release, because the beta will be the one that's actually getting the update first, because it has access to our apt repo. And it looks really nice. We've had people working on it. It looks beautiful.
Nice. Very nice. Before we go any further, Kevin had mentioned about this, about the format, and I think, we're going to continue on with talking to each one of you guys here, but I think that maybe I need to make a video with each of you guys, talking just to you personally about where you started in Linux. That would be an awesome series of each of you guys. So that might be an idea to do.
Sounds good.
Dan, last word.
All right. Thanks, Rocco. Lots of fun. It's a highlight of my Linux week here. Joining the virtual lug.
Yep. Barbara?
As usual, I want to thank you. This is always fun. Like what Dan said, thank you for the virtual lug, because there's nobody around here that I can talk to. Linux-wise.
Right. Adam, last word.
Thanks for putting this on, Rocco. Good times. Good times to see everybody. It's awesome. So keep up the good work.
Eric, last word.
Barb, I talked to my cat about Linux, but she just stares at me. So.
Yeah, my dog looks like I'm weird, and the cats just walk away.
Eric, I get that same look from people I talk to about Linux.
So it's great to see you guys. I really look forward to this, and thanks, Rocco, for putting it together. Have a great week.
Nate, last word.
Hey, thanks again for having me. It's always educational. I like learning other people's perspectives on things, even if Thomas is wrong. And it's good times.
Use me.
Thanks again. Really, I appreciate it, and it's great seeing everybody.
Agreed. Colin, last word.
Thanks for the stream, Rocco. It's always great to be on here. Gnome, gnome, nom, 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 nom for the win this week.
Dave, last word, brother.
Thank you, Rocco, and thank you, all the rest of you, for helping me to keep learning every day more about Linux and computers in general.
Steve, last word.
Thanks as always, Rocco. Shameless plug. I'm going to have a stream on tomorrow morning if anybody's happen to be up. I got a buddy of mine who's an electronics engineer who's been running Peppermint now for about 6 months, and he's going to talk about his experience.
Nice. That's awesome. We got to get a link for your channel, Steve, up in YouTube chat. So let me grab that. Tyler, last word.
I should probably put something here, shouldn't I?
You should probably say something.
So I'm getting my ThinkPad ready for Arch to play with GNOME on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna play with GNOME, right? Mm-hmm.
Yes, GNOME 3.32.
All right,
Nice.
Scott. Last word.
Oh, great show as always, Rocco. Thanks for having me on. And just looking forward to the garden gnomes next week.
All right, Vash. Last word, brother. Vash.
You got mute, Vash?
All right, we will move on. We'll get back to him. Carl, what's up? Last word.
Yeah. Thank you, Rocco, again as always. Awesome show. You guys are all awesome. And we'll see you next week.
Way to be, Chris. Last word.
Well, I just wanted to make Frank feel a little bit more at home here. We got a copy here with Workbench on it, and I have an Amiga.
Yeah.
And this is over
That
at
is
the
awesome.
Communications Museum in Connecticut. That's where I do these live streams from as well. So, and other than that, hey, thanks for putting up with us, Rocco. I mean,
yeah.
Not a problem. Pete, last word. First word, last word, Pete.
I wasn't here earlier for the Fedora, but I run it at work quite a bit, and it works great for me.
See, another Fedora user that loves it. Come on.
Where's your T-shirt?
He doesn't need a T-shirt.
I don't have a Fedora T-shirt.
All right, Big Pod, last word.
Thanks for having us, and guys, thanks for watching us. And don't forget, #blame Thomas.
I love it.
Down, am I?
Scrap Joe, last word, brother.
you love it. You love the attention.
Just good to be around still. That's all. I'm just going to play y'all out.
Okay. Ritual.
Can you hear me?
Last word. Yeah, we can, dude. Come on.
Okay.
Bring it. Ritual, last word, brother.
Go ahead.
Thanks for having us, Rocco. Thanks for having me. Sorry I was a little bit late today. I'm still glad to get in a little bit of time with you guys this week. Yeah, you didn't need me saying anything about Fedora. I'm like, nothing special. So not missing much here from me. Thanks, so. Oh, what will we do next week?
GNOME 3.32 version, the new one that just came out. So you're going to have to be on Arch, I guess, to get it, or something close to that.
Okay, well.
The GNOME desktop environment. That's what we're going to do.
All right, but the newest one.
Yep.
Right? Okay, cool. Sounds good. All right, thanks, guys. Thank you, Rocco.
All right. I want to thank Dan for helping me out tonight. And PZ was traveling, so this is the second week he missed. Miss him. Last week he was sick. This week he went to, I'm so jealous, he went to the Ubuntu podcast meetup. Got to talk with Popey and Wimpy and all those guys. So hopefully he had a good time. He said to me earlier that if he had Wi-Fi at the hotel, he would be here, but if he didn't, he wouldn't. So I guess he doesn't have Wi-Fi at the hotel. Check us out on the Telegram group, Big Daddy Linux /Telegram, and maybe you can help us test out GNOME this week and give us your thoughts. Other than that, everybody have a great week. We'll see you next week. Long live Linux.
Long live
See ya.
Linux.
Take care,
everyone.
Good night. Bye. See ya.
Bye.